Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to Overwatch Central and another Omened by HP video, who are of course proud PC providers for the Overwatch League. Today we're going to be sort of looking at the league, and a specific hero came to mind when looking through some of the previous games. For the most part, we have seen two teams run in the same composition of Orisa, Sigma, Reaper, Doomfist, Moira, Lucio. The more that time's gone on, the more that meta is sort of solidified. But in the playoffs, Atlanta Reign actually brought out a really interesting hero that I do think is worth highlighting, especially for us in competitive where the stakes aren't quite as high and you have a lot more freedom of what you can play. That hero being Ashe. We're going to be talking about how Atlanta Reign used Ashe against NYXL in a match that they did ultimately end up losing, but they surprised a lot of people with a very off-meta pick that actually worked quite well going into the double barrier meta. So that's kind of what we're going over today, where it was used, why it was used, where it's good, where it sucks, and if you should use it yourself in your own games. Because as of right now, Ashe has one of the lowest pick rates out of all of the DPS heroes, and other than the gameplay that was shown on screen, Ashe hasn't been played in the playoffs in other places, at least from what I can tell. Before we dive into specific plays from Hanamura in the background, which is the map that Reign ended up winning with this strategy in a really cool fashion, I kind of wanted to talk about Ashe's role within this team and why she was used in the first place, because both teams had a lot of mind games going on at the time, and I feel when you think about it, it makes sense why Ashe is a lot better picked than you would expect in the meta, but also explains why she's been picked over Widowmaker, McCree, Soldier and Hanzo in that role too. So that's the first area of this video. It starts with the tanks. Orisa Sigma was used the majority of the time, and that means that Orisa Sigma was in play the majority of the time. We need to look at the heroes that aren't being played because that was the case. Specifically, D.Va. When D.Va is active in a game, a lot of DPS heroes are shut down just because of the damage that D.Va's defense matrix can absorb. There are exceptions. Widowmaker and Hanzo are still played an awful lot even when D.Va was in play, but as teams started to play Orisa Roadhog, Double Sniper came back in a big fashion, if that makes sense. When D.Va's not in play, it opens up DPS hero options all across the board, and that's kind of what's happening here. Not to mention that for the most part, teams aren't running Ana as much. Of course, in the gameplay from Hanamura, both teams are running Ana, so it's not really applicable here, but because Ana isn't ran a good portion of the time, it means that there's nobody to sleep an enemy Bob when it comes through. And realistically, that's the only thing that can stop him doing a lot of damage. When he isn't slept or CC'd in any capacity, it does force a team to dedicate resources to either killing him or being able to just deal with him quickly. Like, for example, on screen, Bob gets thrown in, it's a bit of a mess of a fight, and pretty much Excelsior were on the aggressive, were pushing in, and have been put to a grinding halt, and it allowed Reign to clean up. The Bob himself did get a kill onto Jonak, but you saw how much he just sort of controlled the fight. And when a team like Excelsior are running this Symmetra Bastion composition, the boss comp, you can't really give any space away. I do want to come back to each of the abilities and talk about how Baby Bay really utilized this, because the real question is, why was Ashe picked over the other options that could be ran, and have been ran a lot more than her? Her pick rate is probably one of the worst when it comes to hit scan, with Soldier 76 being played the least, but she's in contention with Widowmaker, with Hanzo, and with McCree. What can she realistically do that the other three can't, especially Widowmaker Hanzo, who have been fairly strong and fairly meta for a good portion of this year? What can she do differently? This is where we get into checklist sort of territory to show what Ashe can do that all of the others can't in their specific situations. The first is the long range aspect of Ashe. She is pretty good at range, much like Widowmaker and Hanzo are. McCree is to an extent, but part of being a sniper is the mobility of getting to certain areas. We can talk about that in a second, but generally she can hold her own when it comes to doing damage at range, doing damage, getting pot shots, maybe even getting an elimination, as NYXL are constantly trying to attack point B. For the most part though, it's trying to make sure that NYXL can't get set up by any stretch. And as a sniper, it's kind of your job to find as many angles on the enemy team as you possibly can. That's the thing about all of this. The DPS that are most popular at the moment aren't the ones that do the most damage to barriers against Orisa and Sigma, they're the ones that bypass barriers, Doomfist especially. Your job isn't to break a shield, it's to ignore it completely. That's why he is so strong right now in comparison to other heroes. Reaper is similar. Whilst you can do a lot of damage to a barrier, it's all about teleporting into the backline or wraith forming past the shields, doing the damage and then getting out. That's the general play playstyle is just bypassing the utter strength that double barrier has right now by playing heroes that don't need to worry about doing damage to barriers. That's where heroes like Hanzo, McCree, Widowmaker fall off the wagon completely, and you would assume that it would be the case for Ashe as well, but like I said, the constant movement from Baby Bay, the range that he has on this character, and the way that he's using the coach gun to get around means that he's constantly finding difficult angles on NYXL, meaning that they can't get comfortable ever. And that has a lot to do with the other ability, the Dynamite. It's a similar sort of thing. You see it best here on Numbani, granted they do lose the point, but you do see the Dynamite constantly going in from the Ashe and just getting in free damage. Because D.Va isn't being run by any of these teams, all of this damage gets through for free. Sigma can try and eat it, but it's not consistent as much, certainly not in comparison to D.Va's defense matrix. That's the general gist, and that's what I mean about this being really clever. It's using Ashe, the coach gun, to get into certain positions where it's really difficult for the enemy team to do anything about you. Even with double barriers, teams will have blind spots that you can get a lot of damage in on them, and I guess to an extent they can't really do much to you because their effective range isn't as large as yours. That's why you see Baby Bay constantly rotating. Wherever he sees NYXL coming from the left or the right, he makes sure that he's on the other side of the whole room to give him as much space as he needs. That's the long range aspect, and that is what Ashe does so well with the coach gun, with the Dynamite. It's constant damage that it feels like NYXL don't really know what to do with. But it's also how good she is at close range as well, especially when you have DPS heroes on the enemy team, like a Reaper, like a Doomfist, that are constantly there to try and challenge you. Heroes like Widowmaker, and to a lesser extent Hanzo, will struggle in those 1v1s. Widowmaker especially isn't going to win a 1v1 with a Doomfist unless she's god tier, or the Doomfist is just trash. My point is that Ashe is fairly decent at 1v1s, and she's not terrible by any stretch. She can fire close range, throwing out a lot of damage very quickly in a very twitchy environment, but also she has her coach gun, which enables her to make a little bit of space. Just a clip here, the Reaper teleports onto the high ground where Baby Bay is, he just knocks Reaper off, and that's the end of it. That's the end of that engagement. He got out just fine. With Doomfist, you can knock yourself back and knock them away, but even when a Reaper's in Wraith form, and you don't knock him back in any fashion, you still knock yourself back with the coach gun, meaning that it's a great way to just give yourself a little bit more space, and that's generally how Baby Bay's trying to play all of this, keeping NYXL at arm's length. Bob as an ultimate doesn't really surprise a lot of people. It doesn't have the same impact as some of the other abilities in the game, and in a lot of senses people really underestimate Bob. Especially as I mentioned, if there's an Ana on the enemy team, they could just sleep it, and your whole ultimate is being shut down for the main chunk of time. But it's certainly worth paying attention to the gameplay in the background to see how quickly Baby Bay is farming up his ultimates. But I think this is mostly about positioning. He's seen where his team is, they're constantly setting up these like crossfires between him and the rest of the lineup, and if anybody gets too close, such as Libero on the Doomfist, you still have a few options to keep yourself alive as well as kill them if needs be. The last 45 seconds of this really encapsulates the amazing play from Baby Bay here, and also just a really smart playstyle. It starts off with the long range aspect. NYXL are coming in, they have 3 ultimates to use, 4 ultimates almost, and you can see the Baby Bay is just trying to get pot shots in, most importantly working out information, where the team are, throws a Dynamite in to get a good amount of chip damage onto Libero, who almost dies, requires healing, and then immediately Baby Bay knows where they're going. He sets himself up to be as far away as possible, throws in the Dynamite where there's double barriers to do some damage, and even get a kill onto Sobiobi, who goes in a bit too deep with Baby Bay and Massa all protecting themselves on this little patch of high ground. Speaking of which, the tanks are fighting, the Hulk pulls away the team that allows Erster to get a shot in onto Meko. Dynamite comes in again, putting pressure on the high ground. Doomfist comes in with a meteor strike, and I love this play. Coach going onto the high ground, the Bob onto the high ground, and here Bob's just putting in free damage that NYXL can do absolutely nothing about. Dynamite comes in to do damage again, it's uncontested, Mano slowly dies, and that's it for NYXL. Pretty much a perfect play as far as I'm concerned. And they did everything that they needed to do, and it just seemed so easy. Atlanta Reign doing this to one of the most prolific teams in the Overwatch League with NYXL. Granted, it's the playoffs, so we know how NYXL does there. Really surprising how they made an off-meta hero work in this capacity. But does that mean Ashe is the perfect meta pick now? Really doesn't in this case. Rialto was the next map, and this is what was played by the teams. Again, we saw Baby Bay kind of trying to do something similar by being perched on the left bridge as the team are going right to sort of give himself a little bit of leeway, but manages to get outskilled by Jonak and killed fairly early on. Like I said, the name of the game for this for Baby Bay is to constantly farm his ultimate that he has Bob for almost every engagement that they need, and if he's not doing that, then he might as well play another hero, and that's what ends up happening. It's pretty chaotic on this point. He's trying to do damage, and there's no barrier barriers there that are realistically stopping him, but I guess to an extent it's hard for him to get set up. He's waiting to see what NYXL are going to do, keeping an eye on the doorway. He even goes super aggressive trying to get a kill onto Jonak, but he gets a bit too deep and Mano ends up picking him off. Still, 2/3 away from getting his first ultimate, and Excelsior getting a good portion of theirs too. At this point, Atlanta Reign are on the back foot, they're on this side of the bridge, they need to try and contest, and it just doesn't really seem possible. They let the point go, and they're still stuck in this no man's land where they're neither really engaging nor disengaging, and again, Baby Bay gets picked off by an amazing Hulk Accretion duo. Sabiobi finishes off the rest. Finally, Baby Bay does get his ultimate, but doesn't get to use it as yet again, NYXL are managing to get the picks, amazing sleep, nice little hop up by Animo to finish the kill, and at this point Baby Bay switched over to Mei. Didn't have the impact that he wanted, I needed to change to something a little bit more consistent. Numbani was the final map between both the teams, and I really just wanted to show off point A, as it shows, again, the strength that Ashe has when she has these areas that she can hunker down on, like on the left hand side here, but also realistically, where she has a few issues. Because XL are constantly trying to run this Bastion, it means that Reign have to really focus on making sure that they can't get set up. That's the whole name of the game for them, and so you constantly see Baby Bay throwing in the dynamite into this area. You can see that the damage is doing ticking damage. It even forces the Baptiste to use his immortality field, and without a diva, it's really easy for Baby Bay to just keep doing this to get damage in. He even has the Mercy damage boost in him in order to do a little bit more, but again, he's struggling to get his ultimate at this point. He's still trying to chunk in a bit of damage. Throws in the dynamite again, manages to get some clean hits in, but Libero and the rest of NYXL turn their focus onto Baby Bay and manage to get the pick. I wanted to show off bits and pieces of Rialto and Numbani to sort of show that this strategy does have its pitfalls. When you don't have the same amount of freedom and rotation space as you do on Hanamura point B, and the point is constantly moving, you have very few options in order to set up and constantly change. Whilst Baby Bay had the right idea being on the high ground on the left hand side on Numbani, because he was there the whole time and NYXL most importantly knew where he was, it was quite easy for them to turn their attention on him to really focus him down. And that's a big, mistake 101 for a sniper, is staying in the same spot, trying to do damage. If the enemy team know where you are, they can play around you, so you constantly have to keep them bamboozled and really work on that aspect. But the reason why this works so well on Hanamura point B is because he constantly kept moving. If NYXL came on the right side, he would go left, and vice versa, or be right at the far back if they were coming through main. He knew where they were coming from, they didn't really focus on him too much, but as time went on, they really made sure that they paid attention to where Baby Bay on the Ashe was, because if they don't, he's getting in free damage, and he's farming ultimates like they're nothing. And whilst Bob isn't the most impactful ultimate in the game, he can be really problematic for teams to deal with. It's all about really causing as much chaos as you can. And like I said, it played off perfectly on Hanamura. In short, would I recommend playing Ashe in competitive? I would, actually. I think people should play her a lot more. I've always been a bit of an advocate for this hero. Most of us may say that she's pretty bad. I think that when it comes to competitive, being able to fight long range, being able to farm ultimates without needing to worry about too much, being able to look after yourself in a 1v1 situation that might be in a vacuum, those are the situations where Ashe is much more consistent across the board in comparison to McCree, Widowmaker and Hanzo. This video wasn't intended to really make you see Ashe as the be all end all pick. I just wanted to highlight some really cool strategies and basically show that whilst this meta is very obnoxious, I guess it would be, you can still play other heroes and have a good amount of success with them. More so in competitive than in the Overwatch League, that's for sure. And like I said, Atlanta Reign did end up losing the whole map and round, but they really made NYXL sweat a little bit. But that's everything I wanted to go over today. Thank you very much for watching, and thanks again to Omen by HP for helping support the channel. The Omen esports report was on last week if you want to go check it out, going over a bit of news, and I believe, not confirmed just yet, myself and Miska are going to be on the next episode, so be sure to look out for that sometime in October. Thanks for watching guys, take care, we'll see you soon.